All right, so everything's been sterilized. We're home. We have 2 bags of pork shoulders here, deboned, and he sliced them up so they're ready to go into the grinder. So the first thing I do is I take a couple of pieces of painter's tape, and we're gonna weigh each bag. And then we also have these stainless bins here that also have they also have blue painter's tape on them. And what we'll do is we're gonna weigh them, and then once we weigh them, we'll mark the blue painter's tape on both the stainless bin and the bag. So we'll turn this on. Everything is done in metric, by the way. So let's change the mode to kilos. And this one here is 11.9 kilos. So we'll mark this as 11.9 and mark this one as 11.9. Take this one, 11.9. This guy is good. Makes my job a lot easier. 11.9. At this point, the big scale is done. We'll move the big scale out of the way and we'll start grinding the meat into each one of these bins. I'm gonna make them 2 separate batches at 11.9 kilos each. Okay, we're back and we have our grinder in place. I use a pretty coarse grinding head. It's larger than 1/4 of an inch diameter. And we're going to open up the bag now, and we'll take each bag and grind them separately into stainless containers. Okay, both batches are mixed now, and so basically at this point we're pretty much done with the grinder. So next thing we'll do is just pull out all the pieces for the grinder, and might as well just get that all washed up now. And once that's all washed up, we don't really need this portion of the machine anymore. Just comes apart like that. This unscrews. That's it. So we'll wash these pieces up and we're done with the grinder. All right, so we have all the meat ground. All the parts for the grinder are cleaned up and we're ready to move on. So when I started doing this a couple years ago, I really looked into it, and basically what ended up happening was these, in the old time way, they would just take a handful of meat and add a handful of salt, a dash of this and this and that, and they never really knew exactly what they were doing. And so when something didn't turn out, they didn't understand why. So I looked into it a little further, because it's obvious that when they're making 30 and 40,000 prosciuttos in Parma, they're not just guessing, especially when a prosciutto takes roughly a year to cure. There's more to a science on that. So not only that, but in the olden days, people would slaughter their own pigs, so they knew exactly where the pigs were coming from, what they were fed. And so these days, we don't know whether something has been previously frozen, cryovac, or injected with any other type of things that they do with animals these days. So based on that, we have a way in knowing how fresh the meat is based on the pH of the meat before we start mixing anything in it. So in most cases, a slaughtered pig pH should be in the high 5s, really not much higher than the low 6s. So as long as we're in the high 5s to low 6s, we're pretty safe. As we start getting into 6.4, 6.5, then that raises another red flag. So in the curing process, the key thing here is we're going to introduce a culture, no different than like a yogurt, because there is a certain amount of bacteria function going on, and there is only going to be one bacteria that wins. So if we feed it with a culture that we know is a known good culture, we're basically, by measuring the pH, we'll know whether that culture is taking over and making sure that any of the other worst case scenario bacterias stay away from the product. So we do that by monitoring the pH during the curing and the fermenting cycle. So that's why we introduce a curing process, or a culture. What the culture really does in the fermentation is it drops the pH. When the pH drops below 5.1 is when you really want to start curing at 54 degrees. Because anything below 5.1, we've already gotten over the hurdle of 2 of the 3 major hazardous bacteria cannot live below 5.1. So if we can get the meat below 5.1, we've already jumped a hurdle, knowing that we're safe there. So that is also the key of the bacteria and the fermentation. So in the olden days, the old timers didn't know exactly why they were introducing wine into the meat. But if you think about it, the wine is acidic, and technically the wine drops the pH. So as much as the old timers would always say that they would add wine for flavor, in reality they were inserting wine to drop the acidity, which brings the pH down more into the safety levels, more so than the flavor of the wine itself. So that's one thing we've noticed. So we do not add any wine product in here, and by adding wine, and depending on what type of wine, you don't know how much it's going to drop the pH without a pH meter. If you start getting your pH below 4.9, the meat is going to be very tangy. Now, some people like a tangy meat, but we really want to keep this meat at 5.1 or 5.2 when we introduce it into the curing chamber. So at this point, you'll see that there's a laptop in the screen, and I created my own spreadsheet, and I made it very simple. All of my recipes are on this spreadsheet, and there's only one box that I can input anything into it, and that one box that I input is the weight of the meat in grams. Once I input the weight of meat in grams into that box and press the enter button, it automatically generates all of the other percentages of ingredients that I have for every single recipe that I make, whether it's a mild, whether it's a hot, whether it's a fresh sausage, whether it's a cured sausage or a soppressata. I have them all on the spreadsheets running across here with my ingredients on the side. So as I inputted, remember that this was 11.9 kilos, which is 11,900 grams. We're measuring everything now to the gram. Some of these ingredients are literally 0.3% of the actual meat weight. So grams are very, very accurate. So once I inserted the 11,900 grams, and here's all my recipes here, we're going to go over to a mild Soppressata, which is this one here. And within there, it tells me exactly how much salt I'm going to need for this batch, how much of the culture. We also introduce a dextrose, and the dextrose is basically a sugar. It's only 0.3%. And what the dextrose does is the culture needs something to feed on. So once the culture starts feeding on the dextrose, or you can also use sugar, when the culture is feeding on the dextrose, it releases whatever it releases, and basically that is really what brings the acidity down, that drops that pH level. So, and then we use a curing agent, which is what they call a cure number 2. It is a sodium nitrate. And the cure number 2, sodium nitrate, nitrates are in celery. So the cure number 2 is simply there because salt is not made the same way as salt was in the olden days. So salt a lot of times now is sodium chloride instead of sodium nitrate. So we introduce a sodium nitrate, which helps on the color of the meat, and it gives it an extra little push to know that we're hitting all the safety values through the curing process. So here's a pH meter here, and we're going to turn the pH meter on. And the first thing we'll do is we'll take a clump of meat like this. Now this is before we mixed anything into it. Take a clump of meat like this, and we'll insert the temperature probe, and insert the other probe. And at this point, we're reading 6.02. So we're just a hair over 5.9. It's going down a little, depends on where you probe it. But yeah, we're at about, yeah, here we go. 5.99 is the pH of the meat. We're good to go. We know that this has not been previously frozen. We know that this has not been fed any antibiotics or cryogenically freeze-dried or anything like this. This is true fresh pork, and we're ready to roll. So my next thing we'll do now is I wrote down all of the values of our ingredients on this piece of paper. I can shut down the laptop. I don't need it anymore. Being that both batches are the same weight, this is a good thing. We'll start taking all of the small Dixie cups here, and we're gonna load those with the ingredients for each one. So when we're ready to mix, we have everything pre-measured, and then we're ready to mix the meat. So we'll see you soon. All right, so this is the original grinder here that we took all the pieces off and cleaned. And this company also makes a separate mixing box that connects to the grinder. And within the mixing box, then there are blades that you can see down in there. So this makes things a little easier than the old time. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to load the meat into the mixing box, and we'll load them in 11.9 kilos at a time. And we'll turn the machine on, and once the machine is on, we will add the salt, the curing agent, the dextrose, the red pepper flake, the whole peppercorns, and then as far as the culture, the culture comes frozen. There's a lot of different cultures to choose from. I use a specific culture that's intended for the Southern European type salamis, because it does put out a certain flavor. That culture comes frozen in a powder form, and you mix it with about a quarter of a cup of distilled water, and it activates very simply, like similar to yeast. So that we want to mix with distilled water for about 20 to 30 minutes before we mix it in with the meat. So in about 10 minutes or so, we'll be loading the meat and adding the ingredients. The mix probably doesn't take any more than 1.5 to 2 minutes. Then we'll pull it out of the mixing box. I'm going to transfer it back into the same stainless container and put it in the refrigerator. Again, it's very important that everything stays cold and we don't have any fat smearing or anything like that. So we keep everything cold. Once that's done, then the next process after that is stuffing them in the casings and netting them. Now, the culture does like to see a specific temperature that it likes to work in. So this particular culture likes anywhere from 70 to 73 degrees. So the key, remember, like I told you before, the key is to get this pH down to 5.1. And in order to do that, this culture needs to activate and eat on the dextrose in order to decrease that pH. So what we're going to do once everything is cased is we hang it at, believe it or not, 70 to 72 degrees, and we will have a small separate meat batch in a Dixie cup that we don't put in a casing that stays with the meat, and that becomes our constant meat that we can measure with the pH. And being that I've done this before, it will take roughly 24 to 36 hours for that meat to reach 5.1 in pH. At that point, we weigh them and they go into the curing chamber at 54 degrees at 75 to 80% humidity until the units lose at least 35%. So once the pH is down and then we lost 35% in water activity, we've hit every single hurdle and it's safe to eat. 35% is still kind of mushy, and I normally run them anywhere to 45 to 47% weight loss, and I press them slightly as I go. That process normally takes about 4 to 6 weeks to lose about 43 to 47%. At that point, it's based on feel and texture that you want. Again, anything over 35 is safe to eat. Once the product is cured, it's never uncured, and so at that point, once it's cured, you can hang it anywhere you want. In our situation, we don't want it to dry out any more than it already has, so we will vacuum pack them. We can ship them anywhere. If I have a friend in another state, it doesn't matter whether it's 80 or 90 or 100 degrees out. I don't have to worry about getting that meat to a specific temperature in order to ship it. Once it's cured, it's cured. All right, so we're ready to start mixing. So plug away.
Ehi compare, ci vuoi suonare? Chi si suona un friscaletto? E come si suona un friscaletto? Un friscaletto e tipiti tipiti ta. Ehi compare, ci vuoi suonare? Chi si suona un saxofona? E come si suona un saxofona? Tu un saxofona, un friscaletto e tipiti tipiti ta. Ehi compare, ci vuoi suonare? Chi si suona un mandolino? E come si suona un mandolino? A pling un mandolino, tu un saxofona, un friscaletto e tipiti tipiti ta. Ehi compare, ci vuoi suonare? Chi si suona un violino? E come si suona un violino? A zinga un violino, a pling un mandolino, tu un saxofona, un friscaletto e tipiti tipiti ta. Ehi compare, ci vuoi suonare? chi si suona la trombetta, ma come si suona la trombetta? Pa 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 la trombetta, zinga zingu, violina, plinga plingu, mandolin, tu 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 tu, saxofona, friscalette, tippiti tippiti ta. Ehi compare, ci può suonare, chi si suona la trombona, ma come si suona la trombona? A fumma la trombona, pa 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 la trombetta, zinga zingu, violina, plinga plingu, mandolin, tu 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 tu, saxofone, friscalette.
Smells delish. And based on what I'm seeing here, I might add a little more black pepper to it. All right, this is pretty mixed, and you'll see that it's very sticky. You'll see that it, there you go. It sticks right to your hands. This is ready to go. We're gonna take this, I'm gonna transfer it back into the container and put this in the refrigerator, and I'll mix the next batch. Sure. All right, so so everything is ready to go. Meats are packed in, like when I took it out of the mixer, I made them in small little balls, about the size of 16-inch softballs. The casings have been soaking with a little lemon juice, and then kept in the refrigerator. So the casings are pretty much ready to go. This is a new machine that I'm going to try, and hopefully it works out real well. We'll see how that goes. And then this is a stuffer. So the mixing machine is completely cleaned up. The mixing box is cleaned up. All the grinding tools are cleaned up. And we're down to the final process of just stuffing. So basically what this does is pop this in here like this. Crank this up. And as you crank this up, you'll see that there's a disc that comes up like that. And then this thing folds down like this, and you pop your meat in it. Once you pop your meat in it, close this down, move it over to the other one that goes a lot slower, and then that'll push the meat down through the stuffer and down into the tube and into the casing. And this is a clipping tool, so you don't have to tie every end. They're stainless steel clips, like staples, so which is normally what you see on the store-bought salamis. So I'm looking forward to using this because everybody was getting blisters and burns on their fingers from tying all these things. So I'm gonna pause this for a minute, and then we're ready to rock on. All right, so we're ready to stuff. I have my helper finally, and we're ready to go. So she's gonna grab the little meatballs over there. There you go, pop it in. All right, start loading it. And we load it just like a cannon. Making the meatballs makes it a lot easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not as messy.
Push it. Yeah, get one more in there. Yeah. Okay, good. Good. Okay. This goes down like this. Woo! Oh my God, what am I doing? Okay, we're there. Okay, we'll grab a casing. Oh, shit. Let's see how this works. bad. I think we can manage. Okay, are we ready? Let's see how this works. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. You need to make sure that all the air All right, so we have I don't know, 50 some pieces made here, so that's all done. The clamping worked really well. Glad I got it. Saved a ton of time. So this is a PVC tube I made with a reducer, and here's netting. And we take the netting, put it over the PVC like so. That's good enough. Cut this off like this. Take the other end. Bring the other end. Try to do it in the camera, like so. There you go. Shelly tying that on that. I'm going to grab the salamis, or the Soppressatas. There's 3 of them linked together, right, like that. And we take those, I got a small pricker here, and basically just go through and prick the Soppressatas. And basically what you're doing is, if there's any air pockets in them, it will allow the casing to shrink and get rid of the air pockets. Air pockets are no good. So every time I'm popping this thing, I'm popping probably about 8 holes in each one. So that's about 200 holes per Soppressata right there. And then we take, I left a little extra casing on the one end for a reason. And we're going to take this, and we're going to run it right through the tube, right like this. Hold that. Grab it out on the other end. Flip it upside down. Pull through. Right like that. And then she'll throw a tie on it. When she double knotted it, we took the casing with it. We'll cut the netting here. like so. Put a loop in this thing. She's nodding for the next one. And there's my loop, and we're ready to hang. Now, these are going to go into, I'll explain the refrigerator in a minute. All right, so I have a refrigerator that is no longer working, that I gutted all the shelves out of, and I use it specifically for hanging right now, and this is the fermentation process. By the way, this is a cup of the extra meat. This goes with the meat and follows the meat because this is where we're going to monitor the pH. All right, so this refrigerator that I have that's no longer a working refrigerator is strictly for hanging these. I have a small little heater in it just to make sure, and the heater's on a controller, and all that really does is I have this controller set for 73 degrees. So if it gets any colder in that non-working refrigerator, the heater will only kick on to bring the refrigerator back up to 73 degrees. Now, it sounds high, but this culture, this culture wants 73 degrees to feed off the dextrose, which is going to bring your pH down. So basically, you only keep it in this 73 degree temperature. Right. You only keep it in this 73 degree temperature until the pH lowers to 5.1. Once the pH lowers to 5.1, then we're going to weigh these, and we're going to put a tag on each one so we know what the weight is. And then I'm going to transfer them into a refrigerator that is modified to stay at 54 degrees Fahrenheit. And I have a humidifier in there also to make sure that that refrigerator maintains 75 to 80% humidity. And they will hang in there then until the meat reduces to 35% in weight loss, and at that point they're cured. All right, so here's the refrigerator that I said is broken. We don't use it as a refrigerator anymore. So we hang it in here. This is a temperature sensor that senses the internal temperature. We need to maintain this this box to a very high humidity at 70 to 73 degrees until the pH drops down to 5.1. So this is a small little heater that's in here, and that heater will kick on if it gets any cooler in here, which it's probably not. Right now it's about 69 or 70 degrees in this room anyway. But because of all the cold meat, yes, it's warming it up right now. Once it hits 70, that heater will turn off, and then we'll keep an eye on the pH. And then there's a small cup in the tray here, and that's the meat that is not in casing, and that is our sample to be able to test the pH from. Once the pH gets to 5.1, we'll transfer this to 54 degrees for the rest of the curing.